Imagine being the absolute most famous, most heavily scrutinized woman in human history.
Right.
It is the late 1990s. You are just at the absolute peak of your cultural power.
Mm-hmm.
And yet here you are sitting on a cheap metal folding chair in the back of this anonymous windowless room in Los Angeles.
Just completely blending in.
Exactly. You're surrounded almost entirely by men in dark clothes. The fluorescent lights are buzzing overhead.
Yeah.
And for the first time in perhaps a decade, your absolute favorite part of the evening is the fact that nobody in this room cares who you are.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Not one person has asked for an autograph. Not one person has asked for a favor.
I mean, it is just a stunning visual. You have an individual whose entire daily existence revolves around being perceived,
Right.
being consumed, being adored, or frankly, criticized by millions of people. And she is actively seeking out a space where she is completely invisible.
Yeah, she just wants to vanish.
And what she is doing in that room, the specific notes she's furiously taking down in a journal, that would eventually become the foundational framework that kept her alive.
While so many of her incredibly talented peers perished.
Exactly.
Well, welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today is to unpack a remarkably rare, a highly revealing piece of source material.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one.
We are looking at a comprehensive interview from the Jay Shetty podcast, and the guest is Madonna.
But she isn't doing like a solo retrospective.
Right. No, she is sitting alongside Eaton Yardeni, who has been her Kabbalah teacher for 29 years.
Which is a huge detail.
Huge. And what unfolds in this conversation is not your typical, celebrity wellness fluff.
No, not at all.
There is no talk of green juice or Pilates or skincare routines.
Right.
She hasn't done an interview quite like this in nearly a decade. She isn't out there selling an album. She isn't pushing a global tour.
She's just talking.
Yeah, she is explicitly laying out the literal survival mechanics of extreme fame.
Extreme pressure.
And just extreme human existence.
Which really requires us to look at the historical data of extreme fame, I think.
Let's do it.
Because we have this almost universally accepted cultural physics, right? When it comes to hyper-successful artists or entrepreneurs.
Oh, yeah. The brighter the burn, the faster the fade.
Exactly. We expect the burnout. We expect the tragic end.
It's almost a cliche at this point.
Right. So when you look at someone who has sustained a supersonic altitude for 40 years without losing oxygen.
You have to stop looking at their diet and start looking at their internal architecture.
Yes, their psychological architecture.
Mm-hmm.
And this source material, it essentially provides the blueprints to that architecture.
Mm-hmm.
It delves into ancient wisdom, the mechanics of manifestation, the brutal psychology of radical acceptance.
Which we'll definitely get into.
Oh, yeah. And ultimately, how to operate in a chaotic modern world without completely losing your internal compass.
So, to you listening right now, consider this an invitation.
Yeah.
The sources talk extensively about a concept called the third space.
Which is such a powerful idea.
It really is. This is a physical or mental environment dedicated entirely to self-reflection. It's insulated from the demands of your job and the demands of your family.
So think of this deep dive as your third space for the next hour or so.
Exactly. We are going to unpack a highly practical 4-step tool drawn directly from this framework to reframe any moment of lack or anxiety.
And it applies to everyone. Whether you are about to perform in a stadium of 80,000 people.
Or you're just trying to handle a devastating email on a random Tuesday.
Right. So let's start with the environmental architecture that actually necessitates this framework.
Okay, lay it out.
Madonna discusses a realization that hit her very early in her career. She had achieved the fame, she had accumulated the fortune.
She had all the objective metrics of a wildly successful career.
But the math wasn't adding up. The internal peace remained entirely absent.
The void at the top.
The void at the top, exactly. When the external world provides every material comfort, the absence of an internal life doesn't just quietly sit there.
No, it gets loud.
It becomes a blinding, deafening siren.
Which introduces that brilliant sociological observation from the source text regarding the loss of the third space.
I love this part.
It's fascinating to look back, say, 50 years ago. Human beings generally operated within 3 distinct physical environments.
Right.
You had your home, which functioned as the domain of family, domestic duties, physical rest.
Sure.
Then you had your workplace, right? The domain of economic productivity and survival.
And then you had a third space.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This could have been a temple, a synagogue, a church, a community center.
Maybe a civic lodge, yeah.
Right. It was a dedicated physical location where you stepped out of your identity as a worker And you stepped out of your identity as a parent or a spouse.
And you were forced to introspect. You look at the bigger picture of your existence.
It was a structural buffer zone.
But as society modernized, we largely dismantled that third space.
We just stopped congregating in those centers of reflection.
Our existence narrowed down to this binary oscillation between work and home.
It's back and forth.
And then, as the text points out, the pandemic came along and violently collapsed even those two remaining spaces into one another.
Oh man, completely. The boundary just dissolved.
Your dining room table became your boardroom.
Your bedroom became your office.
Right. And Madonna takes this observation one step further, and it is a chillingly accurate diagnosis of our current moment.
What does she say?
She says, if you remove the spiritual life and you collapse the workplace into the home, you are trapped in the home.
Yeah.
But then we remove ourselves once more. We retreat into the screens in our hands.
Oh, wow.
She literally describes the virtual world of our phones as a prison.
It's a profound shift in human consciousness, really. We are living in a virtual dimension where we don't even inhabit our physical material reality.
Let alone any sort of spiritual reality.
Right. And her argument isn't necessarily that the virtual world is inherently evil, right?
Yeah, not inherently.
It's rather that entering it without an established, robust internal life, it's a form of passive suicide.
That's a strong way to put it, but yeah.
You become a hollow consumer of algorithms, and algorithms, by their very design, are anti-conscious.
They don't want you to pause and reflect.
Exactly. They want to predict your next reactive impulse and feed it. They strip away your uniqueness.
It's the ultimate homogenization of the human experience.
It really is. But what strikes me is that she started looking for an exit from this matrix long before smartphones or algorithms even existed.
Yeah, she felt that void in the 1980s.
Right. She provides two very specific early encounters with spirituality that highlighted her own internal deficits.
The first being her roommate in New York, Mariana.
Exactly. So Madonna is living in New York. She's broke. She's literally eating out of garbage cans.
Trying to make it as a dancer.
Yeah, she is surrounded by danger and chaos. But Mariana is a practicing Buddhist.
Okay.
And every single morning, regardless of the chaos, Mariana wakes up and chants.
Wow.
Madonna notes that she was struck by Mariana's absolute confidence, this unshakable knowingness.
Mariana seemed to genuinely believe that everything was happening for a reason.
Right. She never got flustered.
Meanwhile, Madonna admits she was this dramatic Italian Leo who let everything bother her.
Every setback was a catastrophe.
Let's look at the mechanics of that observation for a second.
Yeah, let's unpack it.
Madonna wasn't necessarily drawn to the specific religious dogma of Buddhism. She was observing the data.
She was looking at the output of Mariana's practice.
Exactly. Chanting, fundamentally, is a technology for regulating the nervous system.
Oh, that makes sense.
It forces a rhythmic breathing pattern. It utilizes vocal vibration to stimulate the vagus nerve.
Right.
And it anchors the mind to a single repetitive focus, which cuts off that catastrophic spiraling of the ego.
So Madonna saw that Mariana had a technology for living that she herself lacked.
And that search for technology eventually led her to a physical practice, specifically Ashtanga yoga.
Yes. And this story is incredible because it shows how quickly our ego will hijack a spiritual tool if we aren't careful.
Oh, absolutely.
So she starts practicing with this renowned teacher named Eddie Stern.
Right.
But because she is wired to conquer, she immediately turns yoga into an Olympic sport.
Of course she does.
She is treating the first series, the second series, the third series as like levels in a video game to be beaten.
She's pushing her body, competing with herself and everyone around her.
It is the ultimate paradox of the hyper-ambitious mind.
You hand them a tool designed for inner peace, and they immediately turn it into an external metric of success.
We see this constantly today.
Oh, all the time. People want to be the best at meditating. They want to track their sleep perfectly.
They want the most aesthetically pleasing mindfulness setup.
The ego completely co-opts the mechanism meant to dismantle it.
But Eddie Stern completely disrupts her framework.
How so?
She gets injured or she's traveling and physically cannot do the advanced poses.
Right.
And she is incredibly frustrated. And Eddie simply asks her, "Are you breathing?" She says, "Yes, of course I'm breathing." And he replies, "Then you are practicing yoga."
He stripped away the performative aspect entirely.
Completely. He explained that the physical poses, the asanas, were never meant to be a gymnastics competition.
They were merely mechanical tools designed to agitate and then calm the nervous system.
Right, bringing the practitioner back to center so they could simply breathe with awareness.
Which forces a devastating realization for someone built on external achievement.
Definitely.
It reveals that the endless pursuit of mastery in the material realm is a distraction.
The poses don't matter, the breathing matters.
It reminds me of the classic scenario where you spend your entire life violently climbing a ladder.
Right. You push past competitors, you endure sleep deprivation.
You bleed for the climb.
And you finally reach the very top rung. You pull yourself over the edge, you look around.
And you realize the ladder is leaning against the entirely wrong building.
Exactly. You won the game, but the prize is empty.
And that is a terrifying altitude to be at. Because if the building is wrong, what do you do with all the energy you spend climbing?
But let's pause and test that logic for a second. If the material world is so predictably unfulfilling, if every hyper-successful person eventually hits that void at the top.
Why do we all keep defaulting to it?
Yes. Is it simply because building a true third space, cultivating an actual internal life, requires agonizing, sustained effort?
While scrolling on a phone or chasing the next paycheck is just the path of least resistance.
Right. Is it just about effort?
I think it goes deeper than just effort. The material world offers instant, measurable gratification.
Dopamine.
Exactly. It numbs the pain of the void temporarily. You get the like, you get the check, you get the applause.
The spiritual world, on the other hand, requires what the source texts refer to as restriction.
Yes. It requires you to consciously pause your immediate desire for a long-term, invisible evolution.
The material world asks you to run from the void.
And the spiritual world asks you to sit in the center of the void and understand it.
And human biology is hardwired to run from discomfort.
Completely. Which brings us to the ultimate, unavoidable discomfort.
The reality check that forcefully shoved her off the material ladder and forced her to look at her internal deficits.
The catalyst of motherhood.
Yes. The sources make it clear that it wasn't until she was pregnant with her first daughter, Lola, that the illusion of her own control fully shattered.
Up until that point, she could fake it.
She says she realized she suddenly knew nothing.
And think about the contrast here.
Yeah, it's wild.
Externally, to the public, she was this brave, audacious, hyper-confident meteor crashing through the cultural landscape.
She dictated trends, she pushed boundaries.
But she admits in the interview that, beneath the armor, she was a slave to other people's opinions.
She secretly lacked deep foundational confidence.
That level of vulnerability is rare. Motherhood, or impending parenthood in general, acts as a massive, unavoidable mirror.
It really does. When you are only responsible for yourself, you can continuously distract yourself from your own deficits.
But when you are faced with the reality of guiding a brand new consciousness, you suddenly realize you cannot impart wisdom you do not possess.
She realized she did not have a foundational philosophy of life to lean on.
She had survival tactics.
But no philosophy.
Right. So she is pregnant, living in Los Angeles, experiencing this quiet internal terror about bringing a life into the world without a compass.
And she attends a dinner party.
This is where the sheer serendipity of the universe kicks in.
It really is.
Yeah.
She happens to sit next to a costume designer she only vaguely knows.
Okay.
They strike up a conversation, and the woman says, "You should come with me to a class."
And Madonna, keeping an open mind, asks what it is.
The woman explains it's a Kabbalah class taught by a Jewish teacher, but she emphasizes that it is a philosophy about the mechanics of the universe and human nature.
Not an exclusionary religious dogma.
Right. And this leads to that incredible visual we discussed at the very beginning of the show.
Yes. The most recognizable pop star on the planet, heavily pregnant, sitting anonymously on folding chairs in the back of a room.
We actually hear directly from Etan Yardeni, the teacher, about that very first night.
Oh, what does he say?
Well, the costume designer had warned him, "Hey, I'm bringing Madonna to class tonight."
Okay.
And Etan admits that he was so entirely focused on his curriculum, so plugged into the material, that he didn't actually know what Madonna looked like.
Wait, really? He had no idea.
He recognized the name as a cultural entity, of course, but he had no face to attach to it.
Which provided the ultimate blank slate. It was the truest manifestation of a third space.
She wasn't an icon there, she was just a student.
Etan notes that she was initially highly suspicious.
Oh, I'm sure.
He says she sat with her arms crossed, looking for the catch. What's the agenda? What do they want from me?
That makes perfect sense, given her life.
But what caught his attention wasn't her fame. It was her intense, methodical perseverance.
Yeah.
Over the next 3 decades, he watched her fill countless journals, taking meticulous notes, hunting for the truth of how reality operates.
Let's dig into why this specific framework appealed to her so much.
Because she grew up deeply entrenched in Catholicism, right?
Exactly. So why did Kabbalah cut through the noise for her?
The sources explain this through the lens of intellectual rigor.
Okay, unpack that.
She discusses her resentment toward her father during her childhood because he operated like a religious robot.
Her words.
Right. She would ask fundamental questions. Why do we genuflect here? Why do we wear these specific garments? Why do we perform this ritual?
And his answer was invariably, because that is what is written. That is what we do.
It was a dictatorship of dogma. It demanded obedience without understanding.
Kabbalah operates on the exact opposite premise, doesn't it?
It does. It invites rigorous, relentless questioning.
She explicitly says, if you can't explain something to me, I'm not interested.
She needed the mechanics.
And Kabbalah offered the whys of the universe. It didn't ask her to switch off her critical thinking to be spiritual.
In fact, she noted how perfectly it aligned with the concepts she was reading about in science and quantum physics.
Itan provides a fascinating historical context to illustrate this.
He mentions the very first known text of Kabbalah, written roughly 4,000 years ago.
The Book of Formation.
Right, and it is only 3 pages long.
Wow, really?
Yeah, but it is highly coded, dense, mathematical, and spiritual architecture.
And then you have the primary text, the Zohar, written about 2,000 years ago.
Which acts essentially as a decoder ring for the Bible.
That's a great way to put it. It explains that the ancient stories, parting seas, burning bushes, plagues...
They are not literal, historical events to be blindly believed.
Right. They are deep, psychological, universal metaphors coding the secrets of human nature, energetic frequencies, and the cosmos.
It bridges the gap between the mystical and the mechanical.
So I want to ask you, the listener, to reflect on this for a second.
Yeah, think about it.
Think about a time when you were thrust into a massive, unavoidable life transition.
Maybe it was becoming a parent. Maybe it was losing a loved one abruptly.
Or taking a terrifying new job, or receiving a scary medical diagnosis.
Did that moment strip away all your cleverness?
Did it expose the fact that when the floor completely dropped out from under you, you didn't actually have a rock-solid philosophy of life to catch you?
Those transitions are moments of profound exposure.
They really are.
And the critical variable is what you do in the immediate aftermath of that exposure.
Do you rush back to the distraction of the virtual world to numb the terror?
Or do you sit in the folding chair in the back of the room, pull out a notebook, and start asking the fundamental questions?
For Madonna, once she started asking those questions and taking those notes, the resulting philosophy didn't just provide comfort in her personal life.
No, it radically, permanently altered her day job.
It changed the very way she interfaced with her own immense talent.
And this introduces an incredibly profound concept from the source material.
The vessel and the light.
Yes. This is perhaps the most vital shift in perspective for anyone operating in a creative, entrepreneurial, or highly successful field.
The source details how her early spiritual studies directly birthed her iconic Ray of Light album.
She became consciously aware that she wasn't just generating ideas from a vacuum.
She was tapping into another dimension of energetic frequency.
Let's break down the core Kabbalistic concept she internalized here.
Okay.
She realized that she is the manager of her talent, not the owner of it.
If we look at the psychological mechanics of the ego, this concept is a monumental, almost painful restriction.
Oh, absolutely. When an artist or a brilliant coder or a CEO does something objectively great, the immediate hardwired reaction of the ego is, I did that.
Look at my genius. I manufactured that brilliance.
But the spiritual framework she adopted says, no, you absolutely did not.
You simply created a clean, disciplined opportunity for yourself by allowing yourself to be a vessel for a universal light to pass through.
She states it plainly. I don't own it. It's not mine.
And here is where the conversation takes a very dark but highly illuminating turn.
Yeah, she draws a tragic, explicit contrast between her own survival and the fate of her peers.
She names Prince. She names Michael Jackson. She names Jean-Michel Basquiat.
These are individuals who are arguably some of the greatest, most potent channelers of creative light in human history.
The output of their lives proves they had access to massive amounts of universal energy.
But the sources argue they lacked the psychological and spiritual infrastructure of restriction.
When you fly that close to an immense power source without an internal filament,
without the grounding wire of knowing you are merely a manager.
The sheer voltage of the light burns you out.
It destroys the vessel.
It's the difference between a lightning rod and a battery.
Oh, I love that analogy.
Right. A battery operates under the illusion that it holds all the power.
It powers the machine. It slowly drains itself of every ounce of energy.
And eventually it is dead, empty, and discarded.
But a lightning rod never claims to be the lightning.
No. A lightning rod is simply a piece of conductive metal that says, I will provide a safe, grounded channel for this massive, violent, external force of energy to pass through me and safely into the earth.
The rod doesn't hold the power. It directs it.
That is the precise mechanical difference.
And the source text makes a deeply provocative point about the use of drugs in this context.
Yeah, this part was intense.
It argues that substances, psychedelics, narcotics, acid, are essentially a chemical shortcut to channeling that cosmic light.
They forcibly pry open the doors of perception.
But they do it without restriction.
Right.
They open the floodgates of immense universal energy without the user having built the necessary spiritual infrastructure to manage it.
This is why it ultimately fries the user's nervous system, leading to burnout, madness, or death.
Madonna explicitly states that she never used drugs to access that creative light.
She possessed an innate sheer determination and drive.
But once she found the Kabbalistic framework, she realized she had to be a conscious, disciplined manager of the magic.
Not an unrestricted, reckless addict to it.
And the implications of this extend far beyond celebrity artists.
Think about the massive cultural obsession right now with manifesting.
Oh, it has become such a buzzword. Everyone wants to manifest a new house, a promotion, the perfect romantic partner.
Oh, she takes an absolute sledgehammer to the modern TikTok version of manifesting.
She really does.
The sources argue that true manifestation requires a deep acknowledgement that you are in a partnership with the universe.
It is not a cosmic vending machine where you insert positive vibes and extract a luxury sports car.
Right. She mocks the idea of people trying to manifest 10 Bugattis and a mansion in every city so they can be the ultimate brand ambassador for Louis Vuitton.
Because manifesting purely for selfish, ego-driven reasons is mathematically finite.
It has a shelf life.
It will eventually leave you entirely hollow. The core tenet, the absolute prerequisite of true manifestation according to this framework, is that your fundamental desire must be to receive for the sake of sharing.
If your internal engine is manifesting success solely to inflate your own ego, the universe eventually recognizes a dead end and cuts off the supply.
The circuit is broken.
But if you view yourself as a conduit, if your intent is give me this wealth or this platform or this talent so that I can distribute it, share it, and elevate others,
then the supply becomes infinite. The current keeps flowing.
The psychological trap we constantly fall into is the arrogant attempt to manufacture the magic.
When we delude ourselves into thinking we own the talent, we desperately try to reverse engineer our past successes.
A writer will say, okay, the last time I wrote a bestseller, I drank exactly 3 cups of this specific coffee. I wore this lucky sweater, and I wrote at 2 a.m. Let me recreate those exact material inputs to force the same output.
And it inevitably fails.
It leads to massive creative blocks, anxiety, and profound suffering.
Because you are treating a mysterious cosmic partnership like an industrial factory assembly line.
You cannot manufacture to manifest, you can only prepare the vessel.
But this raises a crucial, difficult question.
Okay, what is it?
If understanding that you are merely a vessel protects you from burning out your own internal wiring from the inside,
Yeah.
how does this philosophy protect you when the external world actively turns against you?
Oh, right. When the trauma isn't a creative block, but literal violence, systemic destruction, or a complete collapse of your reality.
Which forces us to confront the most intense, demanding part of the source material.
The sheer agony of radical acceptance and karmic destiny.
We must define radical acceptance very carefully here, as it is presented in the text.
Because it is easily misunderstood.
Extremely easily misunderstood. Radical acceptance is the unshakable belief that whatever unshakable, painful, or devastating thing is happening to you is explicitly meant to happen to you.
Precisely in that moment.
Yes, to teach you a specific lesson. And the brutal caveat is, if you refuse to learn the lesson, the scenario will repeat itself in different forms until you do.
Now, it is incredibly easy to say everything happens for a reason when you get a flat tire on the way to work or your coffee spills.
Right.
But the sources detail Madonna's extreme, visceral examples.
We are talking about her early days arriving in New York City and being held at gunpoint.
Being robbed, being raped on a rooftop.
Fast forward decades, And she survives a terrifying bout of bacterial sepsis in the ICU that left her unconscious on a ventilator.
Where the doctors literally did not know if she would wake up.
And then there was the agonizing custody battle over her son,
where she describes literally sobbing on the cold floor of her bathroom, utterly broken, before having to wipe her face, put on a costume, and perform for a stadium of 80,000 screaming people.
These are not minor inconveniences. These are profound, reality-altering traumas.
To apply the doctrine of radical acceptance to a sexual assault or the potential loss of a child requires an almost unimaginable level of spiritual discipline.
This is where Aiton introduces a vital concept to help process this, the idea of the opponent, or the goalie.
Let's unpack the goalie analogy.
Aiton says, imagine you take a kid who wants to play soccer. You put them on a pristine, beautiful green field, you give them a brand new ball, and you put them in front of a wide open net.
There is no goalie.
Exactly. You tell them, go ahead, shoot, score. The kid kicks the ball in. It might be fun for the first 3 seconds.
But ultimately, playing a game with no resistance is boring, unfulfilling, and utterly meaningless.
The universe does not want us to play with an open net. We need the goalie.
The opponent within us. The fear, the crippling doubt, the reactive ego.
And the external opponent, the trauma, the betrayals, the systemic failures.
They are actually the creator's greatest gift to us.
Because without the friction of an opponent blocking the shot, we cannot experience the true, deep fulfillment of overcoming.
According to Kabbalah, we are put on this earth not to coast, but to be co-creators of our own souls by overcoming our unique karmic corrections.
Which is referred to as our tikkun.
So your specific trauma, your recurring nightmare scenario, the one pattern that keeps showing up in your relationships or your career is your unique, custom-designed goalie.
For Madonna, she realized through intense reflection that her recurring karmic lesson revolved around abandonment and betrayal.
It started with the foundational trauma of her mother dying when she was 5 years old. That set the stage.
So, decades later, when the brutal custody battle happened, she felt like history was repeating itself. She was being abandoned all over again.
But the massive spiritual shift, the hinge upon which her survival depended, happened when she stopped playing the role of the victim.
She had to forcefully stop asking, why are they doing this to me? Why is the universe punishing me?
And pivot to asking, how am I abandoning myself in this situation? How am I failing to show up? What is the goalie forcing me to learn about my own resilience?
Okay, I have to push back here. I have to play devil's advocate because I know exactly what the listener might be thinking right now.
Go ahead.
It is incredibly easy to sit in a podcast studio or write in a journal in hindsight and say everything happens for a reason.
Right.
But when someone is literally laying in the ICU on a ventilator or sobbing on a bathroom floor because they might lose their child, isn't looking at them and saying, this is meant to happen to teach you a lesson, incredibly harsh.
Doesn't that cross the line into toxic positivity?
That is a phenomenal question. And the distinction between the two is a matter of psychological survival.
Let's break down the difference.
Toxic positivity demands that you smile through the pain, suppress the negative emotion, and pretend the trauma doesn't hurt. It fundamentally denies reality.
Right.
Radical acceptance, as the sources strictly outline it, does not deny the agony for a single second.
In fact, it requires you to feel the agony fully, to let it wash over you.
But it provides a framework of meaning beneath the agony. It says, this hurts terribly, I am broken, and I'm not going to pretend I'm okay.
But I hold a deep, unshakable spiritual certainty that this pain is not random, chaotic cruelty.
It's the profound difference between meaningless suffering and purposeful friction.
The sources reference Viktor Frankl's seminal book, Man's Search for Meaning, exactly for this reason.
Frankl observed in the concentration camps that the prisoners who survived were not the ones who possessed false, toxic hope.
The ones who cheerfully insisted they would be liberated by Christmas.
Those people died of a broken heart when Christmas passed.
The survivors were the ones who accepted the absolute, brutal, agonizing reality of their situation, but managed to find a core kernel of meaning within it to endure the suffering.
And Essen doesn't just leave us with this high-level abstract philosophy.
He actually provides a literal, real-time toolkit for handling that exact harshness in the moment.
He provides a way to bridge the terrifying gap between being in the middle of a panic attack and eventually finding the lesson.
Which brings us to the promise we made at the very beginning of the show.
We are going to walk through the 4-step tool for overcoming what the texts call lack.
The sources define lack as that immediate visceral illusion that you are unprotected, unloved, alone, failing, or simply not enough.
It's the trigger. It's the spike of cortisol.
And ASEN notes that in our modern hyper-connected world, this feeling of lack happens to us at least 100 times a day.
Very often triggered by the relentless comparison game engineered by social media.
Right, you're scrolling through your phone, you see a colleague's perfect vacation or a friend's promotion, and suddenly your perfectly fine Content Tuesday feels miserable and inadequate.
That instant drop in your stomach, it's lack.
So let's rigorously break down Etin's 4-step process for neutralizing this feeling in real time.
Step 1, pause.
Okay.
Before you react, before you type the angry defensive comment, before you spiral into self-pity, you must pause and say internally, what an opportunity.
Which, let's be honest, feels completely insane in the moment.
It really does.
Your amygdala has been hijacked, your brain is screaming, this is a disaster, defend yourself. And you are supposed to take a breath and say, what an opportunity.
But what you are doing biologically is interrupting the neural pathway of panic.
You are recognizing the lack not as a punishment, but as a disguised gift designed to reveal light.
Exactly. You are forcing the prefrontal cortex back online, which leads directly to step 2, embrace.
This means actively allowing the discomfort to exist in your body.
You do not try to fix it immediately.
We are a society deeply conditioned to eradicate discomfort the millisecond we feel it.
We seek external validation. We eat junk food. We snap at our partner to offload the anxiety. We buy something we don't need online for a quick hit of dopamine.
Embracing it means sitting in the dark room and letting your eyes adjust to the shadows.
Sitting in the dark. That transitions us to step 3, which is arguably the most mind-bending, difficult concept in the entire framework.
Certainty beyond logic.
This is the core engine of the entire process. You must tell yourself, all the light I need to survive this is already within me.
You have to inherently trust the process, even when the logical, calculating brain and the terrified human heart are screaming in absolute panic.
Let's explore the mechanics of this. In a functional material world, logic is how we survive.
If you are waiting for a train and the train doesn't come for 3 hours, logic dictates you leave the station.
Logic says the system is broken, abandon ship, find another way.
But spiritual certainty asks you to stay at the station.
It asks you to trust that the delay, the broken system, is actually saving your life from a derailment down the line, even if you can't see the tracks ahead.
The sources use a beautiful natural botanical analogy here to explain this.
I love this one.
Think about a piece of fruit growing on a tree. Before a fruit becomes ripe, soft, and sweet, it must go through a prolonged developmental phase of being incredibly hard and bitterly sour.
The sourness is not a mistake. It is a biological prerequisite for the sweetness.
The sour compounds break down to create the sugars.
If you bite into it prematurely when it's sour, declare it a bad fruit, and throw it away in disgust, you permanently rob yourself of the sweetness that was inevitably coming.
Wow. If you throw away the sour experience, you miss the sweet resolution.
The sourness is the mechanism of the sweetness.
So certainty beyond logic is the profound trust that the sourness of your current trauma, your anxiety, or your trigger is just an unripe blessing.
And once you've paused to interrupt the panic, embrace the discomfort without numbing it, and establish that certainty beyond logic.
The emotional reactivity finally begins to fade.
The heart rate goes down, the cortisol clears.
And then, and only then, can you move to step 4, ask for the lesson.
You ask the universe or your higher self, where am I too attached in this situation? What expectation do I need to let go of?
Notice critically that you do not ask this question in step 1.
In step 1, you are too emotionally volatile, too defensive.
You have to stabilize the vessel before you can receive the answer without bias.
So I have to ask you, listening right now, thinking about your own week,
Yeah, think about it.
when was the last time you felt a pang of jealousy or fear or deep insecurity, and instead of sitting with it, instead of letting the fruit be sour, you instantly grabbed your phone to numb the feeling with a distraction?
Or you snapped at someone to offload the anxiety.
We are a society utterly terrified of sour fruit.
And letting things be sour is incredibly difficult to practice on yourself. You have to fight millions of years of human survival instincts that tell you to avoid pain.
But as the sources reveal, if it is difficult to practice on yourself, it is almost impossible to practice when it comes to the people you love.
Especially your children.
Which brings us to a massive, counterintuitive, Kabbalistic concept that has the power to change how you look at all of your relationships.
The concept of the bread of shame and the paradoxical danger of giving.
Madonna speaks very candidly and vulnerably about her ongoing daily challenge with her children.
She has acquired immense wealth, unimaginable resources, and her immediate biological maternal instinct is to give them everything she never had growing up.
She wants to use her power to remove all their obstacles.
But she realizes through her studies that she has to let go of the illusion of control and act as a manager, not a parent.
And Eaton introduces this devastatingly accurate term, the bread of shame.
This is the spiritual concept of giving someone something they haven't earned, or solving a problem for them that they were meant to solve themselves.
It is the psychological trap of overgiving. We see someone we deeply love struggling, a child failing a class, a friend in financial ruin, a spouse overwhelmed.
And our empathy violently kicks in. We want to be the hero, we want to remove their pain, we want to rush onto the field and tackle their goalie for them.
Because, let's be honest, saying yes and fixing the problem provides immense short-term relief for both of you.
You get to be the popular, nice parent. You get to be the generous savior friend. Everyone is happy. The crisis is averted in the moment.
But the sources argue that by doing this, you are actually causing catastrophic long-term pain.
You are actively robbing that person of their own spiritual process of overcoming. You are stealing their tikkun.
You are planting seeds of chaos rather than seeds of light.
True, profound giving sometimes requires the giver to be highly unpopular.
It requires you to sit in the intense, agonizing discomfort of saying no, watching the person you love struggle, cry, and fail, and trusting with certainty beyond logic that the struggle is absolutely necessary for their soul's evolution.
It is the ultimate people pleaser's dilemma, and we can expand this way beyond parenting.
Think about adult friendships.
How often do we rescue a friend from the consequences of their own toxic decisions, lending them money or making excuses for them, only to watch them repeat the exact same mistake a month later?
We fed them the bread of shame.
Think about corporate leadership. A manager who micromanages and sweeps in to fix every single mistake their team makes is actively preventing their team from ever developing competence or resilience.
By trying to be the savior, you inadvertently become the saboteur. You stunt their growth to soothe your own anxiety about watching them struggle.
It perfectly mirrors the biological analogy of a butterfly struggling to escape a chrysalis.
A scientist is watching a butterfly violently thrashing, straining, trying to break through the tiny restrictive hole at the top of the cocoon.
It looks agonizing. It looks like the butterfly is suffering needlessly.
So, out of a misplaced sense of compassion, the scientist takes a tiny scalpel and gently slices the cocoon open to widen the hole. The butterfly slides out easily, completely free.
But the tragedy is, it can never fly.
Exactly. It just crawls around the table with a swollen body and shriveled, useless wings, and eventually it dies.
Because the scientist didn't understand the mechanics of the struggle.
The agonizing, violent friction of pushing through that tight opening of a chrysalis is the exact necessary biological mechanism that forces fluid from the butterfly's body into its wings, giving them the structural strength and rigidity required to fly.
The struggle is the mechanism for flight.
By removing the friction, you destroy the capability. The bread of shame is the scalpel. It feels kind, it feels empathetic, but it is spiritually and developmentally lethal.
But sometimes the people we must allow to struggle, or more accurately, the people who have caused us the most profound, agonizing struggle in our own lives, force us into the final, hardest spiritual boss battle of all.
The ultimate test of this entire framework.
Which brings us to our final core theme, forgiveness as the ultimate restriction.
The sources spend a significant, weighty amount of time on this. Madonna has been through massive, public, and deeply private betrayals.
And she freely admits that her default factory setting is a fighter. She is a street-smart kid from Michigan.
She says, if somebody messes with me, they're going to get it. She wanted revenge. She wanted them to experience the karma they deserved. She wanted justice.
But over the course of decades of study, tracking the data of her own emotional states, she comes to this stark, unavoidable realization.
Holding on to a grudge, harboring vengeance, is exactly like swallowing a bottle of poison or actively growing a cancer inside yourself.
It is a prison that exclusively weighs the victim down, while the perpetrator often walks free, completely unaware.
She shares this incredibly intense, deeply personal story about her brother.
They were estranged for years and years, the relationship was toxic, and she viewed him actively as an enemy who had betrayed her.
But then he became terminally ill. He reached out to her in his final days, essentially saying, I need your help.
Imagine the ferocious rationalization of the ego in that moment. The ego says, why on earth should I help my enemy? They made their bed, let them suffer the consequences of their actions. This is their karma.
Her ego absolutely fought it. She admits she didn't want to go at first, but she applied that ultimate restriction.
She stopped her reactive, vengeful nature, and she went to him. She helped him.
And she describes the internal result not as a defeat, but as an immense release, a massive, crushing load of baggage taken off her back.
That she was able to sit with him, hold his hand as he was dying, and say the words, "I love you and I forgive you."
And the staggering power of that forgiveness is echoed in her near-death experience in the ICU when she was battling sepsis.
The sources recount that while she was unconscious, hovering between life and death on a ventilator, her mother, who had died when Madonna was just 5 years old, appeared to her in a vision and asked if she was ready to come with her.
If she wanted to finally cross over and end the fight.
And she refused. She said no.
And when she finally woke up, she realized the reason she anchored herself back to the physical world wasn't for more fame or money.
It was specifically because the word forgiveness immediately came to her mind.
She realized, with terrifying clarity, that she still had people she needed to forgive. She could not leave this realm with that poison still circulating in her spiritual system.
This is where we have to rigorously break down the actual physics of forgiveness in this spiritual framework.
In our modern culture, we often view vengeance, spite, and canceling someone as powerful, assertive actions. We think anger is armor.
But spiritually, they're just low-level reactive energy. When you are vengeful, you are still being puppeted by the trauma.
You are letting the person who hurt you dictate your emotional frequency. True forgiveness is a profound, incredibly difficult act of restriction.
It's reclaiming the steering wheel of your own karmic destiny. It shifts the internal spotlight entirely.
Instead of obsessively asking, what is wrong with them? How can I punish them? How can I expose them? You restrict that impulse and ask, how can I elevate my own soul in spite of them? How do I clear my vessel?
Because the brutal truth of reality is the other person might never change.
The source material asks a very difficult, very common question. What if the person who betrayed you shows zero remorse?
What if they gaslight you? What if they have absolutely zero consciousness about the pain they caused?
Which is the hardest pill to swallow. It feels deeply unjust. Is it even possible to forgive someone who isn't even sorry?
In this framework, not only is it possible, it is mandatory for your own survival.
Because forgiveness has absolutely nothing to do with absolving the other person of their accountability. It does not mean what they did was okay.
It is a selfish, self-preserving internal release of the poison. It is you deciding firmly that you will no longer let their lack of consciousness dictate your internal frequency.
It is an action entirely independent of their behavior. You forgive them to free yourself.
She even wrote songs about this exact realization later in her career, a song called Fragile about her brother, and a song literally titled Forgive Yourself.
Because the chorus repeats this vital, profound concept. If you can't forgive me, forgive yourself.
We hold ourselves in these miserable, windowless prisons of guilt and shame, just as tightly as we hold others in prisons of resentment.
Accountability for your actions is necessary to grow, but perpetual guilt is just the ego indulging in self-shaming.
It is a useless emotion that halts all forward momentum. You cannot receive light if you are filled to the brim with guilt.
Wow. Okay. We have covered a massive, sprawling amount of philosophical and psychological ground today.
They are preparing to land the plane, tying this entire journey back to the core reason we are here.
We've traveled from recognizing the void at the top and escaping the isolating prison of the virtual world to realizing we don't even own our own greatest talents. We are simply lightning rods managing the light.
We've walked through the brutal agony of radical acceptance, learning the mechanics of the four-step tool so we can sit in the darkness of lack until our eyes adjust to the disguised opportunity.
We've examined the absolute heartbreak of avoiding the bread of shame with those we love, watching them struggle in the chrysalis so their wings can develop strength.
And finally, the ultimate restriction of embracing radical forgiveness to clear the poison from our own systems.
And all of these tools, all of this intense restriction, serves one ultimate unified goal. It's a phrase repeated by both Madonna and Etan throughout the entirety of the sources.
The fundamental driving purpose of this entire spiritual framework is to receive for the sake of sharing.
Yes, to forge yourself into a vessel so strong, so structurally sound, so clear of ego and poison, that the immense light of the universe can pour through you and out to everyone around you without blowing your circuits.
Because, as the sources so beautifully note, look at the architecture of nature.
Everything in the universe is constantly serving something else.
The sun provides light and heat without asking for a receipt. Trees provide oxygen and shade. Water gives life.
The natural fundamental design of the cosmos is generosity.
When we hoard our talents out of ego, or hoard our grievances out of spite, or hoard our wealth out of fear, we are operating in direct, painful friction with the fundamental physics of the universe.
Which leads me to a final thought for you to mull over as you transition out of this third space and go back into the chaos of your day.
We talked at the very beginning about survival mechanics, about what keeps the firework from burning out, what keeps the vessel intact.
If everything in the universe is constantly serving, and if our ultimate goal is to become a channel that does the same, then what if the person or the problem causing you the most severe anxiety right now is actually just your requested goalie?
What if the absolute worst, most frustrating obstacle you are facing today isn't a random punishment, but the exact custom-designed resistance you need to finally build the strength to become the person you were meant to be?
What if the jagged white line on the X-ray of your life isn't just a break, but the exact blueprint for how you heal stronger?
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into these incredibly profound sources. Do yourself a favor, step out of the virtual world for a bit today, go find your third space, sit in the quiet, and we'll see you next time.
Hello, it's Rod's friend here, Gino from Real Everyday English. Sorry for interrupting your video. I just want to make a quick recommendation that you subscribe to Rodrigo's channel. He's an amazing guy, he's so humble, he's so dedicated, and he creates absolutely fantastic content. See you people soon. Bye-bye. God bless.